Introduction to the Golden Elixir of Cultivation. Cultivate the 5 realms of immortals, and the Golden Elixir is the highest. Planting a seed of Tao in Dantian, entering the Tao, practicing, crossing tribulations, and becoming an immortal. The Taoist scripture says, "A golden pill enters my abdomen, striving to become a carefree immortal." Underneath the cold nightmare horse, stepping on the icy river in dreams.Bai held an iron mace and interrupted someone else's path to immortality. And all of this starts with the big turtle in the Heishui River. Chapter 1 Mysteries in the Fetus. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fuchan County, Changgu Town. In the Heishui River outside the town, it was pitch black, and a faint figure could be seen floating in the water. Gollum, the cold liquid poured into Bai Mo's mouth and nose, straight into his lungs, choking on his chest as if it had been burned by fire, and it was extremely spicy. Under intense coughing, more river water was poured in, and I wanted to struggle, but all I felt was a splitting headache, my hands and feet were weak, and my strength was barely exerted. Are you going to die? In the turbulent water flow, the more the river was filled, the more Bai Mo's mind dissipated, and he let the water carry him down to the bottom of the river. In his hazy eyes, he only felt the water in front of him getting darker and more piercing. The seemingly familiar scene exacerbated the headache a bit. In the blink of an eye, as if breaking a thin film, images of high-rise buildings, iron birds, golden fur, black skin, and various fragmented scenes flooded into my mind. Previous life. Illusion. Unfortunately, I'm about to die. His consciousness became increasingly blurred, and he murmured incoherently. Before long, he completely lost consciousness and breath. Suddenly, the sinking trend of Bai Mo's body paused, and a cold hard object appeared at his feet. It has edges and angles, with some curvature, as if it were some living creature. Shaking and swaying, lift him up towards the river surface. Wow! The body floated out of the water, but remained motionless for a long time, with drooping hands and feet, drifting with the current. As time passed, a small bump suddenly appeared in the chest of the body, and then the bump became more and more obvious. Cough, cough, cough. Bai Mo suddenly opened his eyes and coughed violently, vomiting out large mouthfuls of accumulated water. As the water in his lungs was cleared, he greedily sucked in the air, wishing to fill his lungs. The heat in his chest gradually subsided, his vision became clearer, and his consciousness became more conscious. Who? I've come back to life. Next time fishing, make sure to wear a helmet. Why is this water black? Bai Mo breathed heavily, grateful that he could survive from the water, but the pitch-black river water made his mouth stagnate. At the next moment, a sharp pain suddenly hit the forehead, and a large amount of memories surged out like waves. Various unfamiliar scenes emerged in consciousness, and then became familiar again. Is there really a theory of reincarnation in the world? Did you awaken your past life before you died? Bai Mo's heart was filled with astonishment, and a sense of absurdity arose. In his past life, he drowned while fishing, but in this life, he was also buried in the water. 16 years is like a fleeting moment, when you open your eyes and see, has the world changed? After a few breaths, as his memory gradually settled deep in his consciousness, his breathing became much smoother. Hush! Through the reflection of the river, the face of this world appeared before me, with a hint of elegance and bravery, and a very good appearance. Only the forehead appeared abrupt, with a high and prominent lump clearly visible, with a hint of blood overflowing and then being washed away by the water flow. He couldn't help but raise his hand to gently caress, and a severe pain made his face twitch and he grinned, but he also regained consciousness. Noticing the gradual increase in strength on his body, he quickly patted the water surface to maintain balance and floated himself up. The water in the river was too fast, and one mistake could easily be washed away. Bai Mo looked up at the stone bridge in the distance. Today, the sky was dark, and he specially got up early to come here to fish. Unexpectedly, he hit his luck and caught a 3-foot-long black armored carp. Before he could catch it, he was hit on the forehead by a black shadow, instantly losing consciousness and falling into the river. Thinking of the black armored carp, his face turned a bit ugly, and he couldn't care what the black shadow he had just lifted up was. He found the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com and used his hands and feet to swim towards the riverbank 7 or 8 zhang away. This Heishui River is not as gentle as ordinary rivers. The black armored carp in the river is unique to the Heishui River. It has black scales and is very hard, as if covered with a layer of armor. It has teeth in its mouth, with sharp scales and teeth, and feeds on flesh and blood. This kind of fish is ferocious and bloodthirsty. It is extremely aggressive and has great power in the water. It can drag a strong man into the water. It is extremely difficult to catch. In addition, the river is turbulent, and if ordinary people accidentally fall into the water and encounter it, they will definitely not survive. Only a few people in Changgu town would come here to fish for black armored carp. As for going down the river to catch fish and casting nets for fishing, it is absolutely not daring. There have been people who have done such things before, but they either got bitten off the net rope or were dragged into the water with their nets, becoming food for the fish. A tragic lesson is vividly remembered, and the first thing the town warns children to do is not to play in the Heishui River. In addition, there is a type of one-horned black snake in the river that is highly poisonous and easy to attack. If bitten by a one-horned black snake and unable to hold on for a cup of tea, one will die. Perhaps in response to the phrase, "Good fortune never comes twice, misfortune never comes alone," Bai Mo swam halfway and suddenly heard several sounds of water behind him. He turned his head and suddenly felt a surge of excitement in his heart. He quickly swung his arms in circles and rowed 2 points faster. Not far from the rear, perhaps there was a smell of blood, and a group of black shadows appeared faintly. The small ones were only the size of a palm, but the 2 leading ones were actually 4 or 5 feet long, stirring up water whirlpools like sharp arrows, weaving through the water and constantly approaching him. Wherever they passed, the other fish and shrimp immediately fled. After all, people in the water can't swim as fast as fish. After a few breaths, those black shadows have already reached behind Bai Mo. Chapter 2. What a big Aotou. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A head of black fish covered in scales and armor, with a wide open mouth and sharp white teeth. At such a close distance, Bai Mo could even see a few strands of flesh hanging between the teeth of one of the black fish, soaking in the water and turning white like twisted tentacles, wriggling with the water flow. A foolish fish swam slowly and was bitten off half of its body by one of the black fish in one bite. It was eaten completely in the blink of an eye. Before long, the nearest black fish had reached his feet and seemed to be about to bite off his toe in one bite. Bai Mo's eyes twitched slightly, his toes hooked, he took a deep breath, calmed down, exerted force on his waist, and flipped over in the water, facing upwards. He curled his legs and then kicked it hard, putting it on the head of a black fish he had bitten. It was as if he had kicked the bark of a tree, with a very hard touch. Bai Mo was not surprised but happy, and used the force from his feet to jump forward a long way. With Bai Mo's full kick, the black fish that was kicked only shook its head and brain for a moment, then swung its tail and chased after it again. As if angered by this kick, the black fish swam in the water a bit faster than before. In the blink of an eye, it rushed to Bai Mo's feet and surrounded him with a few other black fish. Bai Mo was forced to stop and watched as the black armored carp opened its black mouth, the size of a skull, with sharp teeth intertwined in its mouth. Senbai was terrifying and couldn't help but shiver. He let out a dry cough and said, "Brother fish, can we discuss and go home separately? There are still people at home waiting for me to eat, and I have a big appetite. I'm already hungry." The black armored carp just swam around him, leaving him less and less space. Glancing at the shore still more than 2 zhang away, Baimo gritted his teeth as he saw the black fish about to bite. A wave of malice surged in his heart. He stared at one of the black fish, clenched his fists, vigorously splashed water with his legs, and pounced first. With a fierce punch, he hit one of the black fish's eyeballs, splashing a white slurry. Immediately, he used both hands and feet, gripping the scales near the fish gills with one hand and gripping the black fish's dorsal fin with the other, tightly gripping the fish's body. Even if you die, you have to pull a cushion on your back. His dorsal fin was sharp like a knife, and in an instant, he cut several blood wounds in his palm. Baimo turned a blind eye to the wound, and the waves of pain only added a touch of malice to his heart. He grinned and bit down, no matter where it was. Feeling pain, the black fish began to struggle violently, with astonishing strength. The fish's tail swayed, and with Baimo, it churned in the water, causing large splashes of water. Baimo's heart tightened. In his lifetime, not only was he made of copper skin and iron bones, but he was also considered a natural talent with strong muscles and bones. Coupled with years of fishing for black armored carp to eat, his body's strength was at least several 100 pounds, and now he couldn't control it. He felt dizzy and bloated after being thrown, his chest was suffocated, and he was in the water, unable to borrow any strength. His strength gradually weakened, and after a few short breaths, he was thrown out with the sudden twitching of the fish tail. Oh no! The water was streaked with blood, both human and fish. Several black fish were stimulated and their eyes turned red. Wow! Not far away, a sudden sound of water rang out, and these black fish seemed to have encountered a natural enemy and were about to scatter and flee. Click! In the turbulent river water, a basin-sized dark head suddenly protruded from below and stopped the black armored carp. The head opened its big mouth, revealing 2 rows of thick teeth, and tightly bit a black armored carp. Without waiting for the black armored carp to resist, its big mouth closed its upper and lower jaws, and the black armored carp immediately broke into 2 pieces. It was thrown and caught by the big mouth, and swallowed in a big gulp. In the blink of an eye, Baimo was a bit stunned by the unexpected situation. Taking advantage of this, the other few black armored carp had already fled far away. What is so fierce that even the hegemon of the Heishui River, the black armored carp, is so afraid? Why haven't you heard of it before? Baimo looked at the head retracting and speculated in his heart. Thinking about it, his heart suddenly moved. Every living creature in the world has its own territory. At such a distance, could the thing that lifted him from the bottom of the river before be the one in front of him? The water is too dangerous, let's get to the shore first. Baimo regained consciousness and quickly started swimming. Just now, I was led by the black armored carp and ran a long way towards the center of the river. At this time, it was more than 10 zhong away from the shore. Perhaps he was intimidated by the unknown creature, but the distance was quite calm. In no time, he landed. Whew! Until then, Baimo finally felt completely at ease, breathed a sigh of relief, and turned to look at the pitch-black river surface. After a few breaths, circles of ripples suddenly appeared on the river surface about 10 feet away, and the waves grew larger and spread towards the distance. Baimo took a deep breath, silently took a few steps back, prepared, and planned to run immediately if there was anything wrong. Wow! A curved object suddenly appeared from the center of the water wave, getting bigger and bigger. In the blink of an eye, the creatures at the bottom of the water completely surfaced, and it turned out to be an astonishing black giant turtle. This giant turtle has thick and sturdy limbs, like beams and pillars of a house, with skin covered in horn scales. Its toes and claws are distinct, and it is feet long. The carapace on the back is arranged in an orderly manner, with undulating heights and sharp edges, and some algae attached to it. It looks several circles larger than the largest stone grinding disc. The giant turtle slowly poked out its thick and long head, and the thick horn sheath on its head was visible to the naked eye. It had a rugged appearance, with fine scales growing at the back of its head, extending all the way to the end of its neck and sinking into the turtle shell. Bai Machu looked at the whole picture, his face was shocked, and he couldn't help admiring it. He said, "What a giant turtle, I don't know how many years it will take to grow to this point. Its size is rare in ancient and modern times. It is just like the legendary big turtle. When the head was fully extended, it was even larger than a regular basin. A pair of eyes as big as small bowls were as dark as ink, and they met Bai Mo in the same direction." Bai Mo's face stiffened and he smiled faintly. He calmed down and bowed to the giant turtle, thanking him loudly. "Thank you very much, Brother Ao, for saving your life." Zhuo didn't see any unusual behavior, just silently stared at Bai Mo for a moment, then silently sank into the Heishui River and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Not long after, Bai Mo was about to turn around and leave when suddenly a black armored carp about feet long flew out of the water. Judging from its position, it should have been thrown out by a giant turtle. The black armored carp landed not far in front of Bai Mo, jumping in place, its sharp-toothed mouth constantly opening and closing, extremely ferocious. Bai Mo looked into the crimson eyes of the black armored carp and recognized it as one of the ones who had just chased him. A strange smile gradually appeared on his face. He looked around a few times, his eyes suddenly lit up, and he bent down to pick up a stone and approached the black armored carp step by step. Fish brother, I've already told you to go back to your own homes. You must not listen." Bai Mo weighed the stone in his hand and took advantage of it. In the next moment, he aimed it at the fish head and smashed it hard. Chapter 3. He and Li Changji. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When? Dang! After 2 or 3 efforts, the scales and armor on the head of the black armored carp shattered in half, and all of its sharp teeth were knocked off by him. Bai Mo threw away the stone, clapped his hands, and looked at the dead fish's eyes staring at him. After confirming that the fish couldn't resist, he nodded in satisfaction. He bowed to the river and then took off his short shirt, revealing his sharp upper body. He wrapped the black armored carp in a knot and carried it behind him, happily walking towards the distant stone bridge. According to the elderly in the town, black armored carp benefits the liver and kidneys, strengthens muscles and bones, and can greatly nourish qi and blood. Compared to ginseng and deer antler, many people use it for impotence. It is said that the largest one can grow up to 10 zhong long, thicker than a large wooden barrel used for slaughtering pigs, like a dragon. It is priceless, but no one has ever seen it. It is precisely because of the large supply of black armored carp that wealthy merchants often come to Canggu town to purchase them at high prices. Even small carp that are palm long can be sold for a few coins as long as they have all their heads and tails. If it is in size, it can be called a rare treasure, boasting 1 or 2 black carp and 1 or 2 silver. As for the one behind it, although it's a bit small and not very good in appearance, it can still sell for a few taels of silver, which is considered a small fortune. If it weren't for its ferocious nature and infinite power, it usually only swims in deep water and likes to drag people into the water. Catching it would be too difficult, and one could only rely on luck, afraid that it would have been salvaged long ago. Bai Mo carried the fish on his back and walked along the shore for about a mile, then walked up the stone bridge where he had been fishing before. This bridge is called Yalong Bridge, with mottled marks on the bridge deck. The small beasts squatting on both sides of the bridge railing have been polished and blurred by wind and rain, and a 7-foot-long rusty iron sword is hanging under the bridge. An old man in the town said that the Heishui River, formerly known as Yongchang River, was about 120 miles long and connected to the Changshui River at its source. There is a black dragon perching at the bottom of the river for cultivation. One night 1,000 years ago, there was a great storm and thunder, followed by a blood rain that dyed the entire Yongchang River black. Afterwards, the locals changed their names and called it the Heishui River. Some people say that this is the failure of the black dragon to transform into a dragon. The black water is transformed by the blood of the dragon. The black armored carp and the one-horned black snake in the river are both descendants of the dragon. Eating them not only greatly nourishes vitality, but also enhances male fertility, creating a great reputation. Later, in order to prevent the resentment of the dragon from causing trouble after its death, someone built this 100-zhong stone bridge across the Heishui River, and a long sword was also hung at the bottom of the bridge. The truth is still unknown, but this Yalong bridge and the sword under it have existed since the founding of Yasukuni, at least for over 600 years. During festivals, the people of the town cannot help but come here to pay their respects. On the stone bridge, Bai Mo stood silently in the middle of the left side, which was where he was fishing at that time. He remembered clearly that when it was just dawn and he arrived, there was no one else on the bridge. He caught nothing in a row, only some water plants, shrimp, and the like. He was mesmerized while fishing. The last shot was never hooked for a long time, until he caught a 3-foot black armored carp. He exerted all his strength and wrestled with it, exhausted from exhaustion, before gradually lifting it up. Before he could have just received it, he heard the wind blowing overhead. Subconsciously, he looked up and was hit head-on. If it weren't for being saved by the big turtle, he would have lost his life long ago. If I remember correctly, there shouldn't have been anyone else on the bridge at that time who could knock people unconscious from a distance. Who in Changgu town has this ability? Why haven't they heard of it before? Can they be foreign experts? When have I offended such people in the martial arts world? Bai Mo furrowed his brows and kept pondering. Although he had not found any clues, he still had some clues. Being able to accurately hit the center of the eyebrow should be due to practicing hidden weapon skills such as the flying locust stone. With his exceptional talent in muscles and bones, he can knock him unconscious in one go, and the required strength is definitely not small, which greatly reduces the range. As the saying goes, being poor in literature and rich in martial arts is not something that ordinary people can afford just for daily expenses. Moreover, the inheritance of martial arts is comparable to wealth and life, extremely rare. It either comes from the powerful members of the public sect, the general's family, or from the powerful sects and martial arts families. But these few things have nothing to do with Changgu town. Although there are several martial arts schools in the town, they only teach some martial arts skills and techniques, at most dealing with some mischievous rascals. Even though the martial arts school owners claim to be experts one by one on weekdays, in Bai Mo's opinion, their physical strength is not much stronger. If they really want to take action, it's not certain who wins or loses. Pop. The black armored carp bounced a few times, and its tail pulled on his back, leaving a red mark. Bai Mo regained his senses and looked at his reflection on the Blackwater River under the bridge. Suddenly, there were ripples on the water surface, perhaps a few fish and shrimp hiding in the water grass, but were found and swallowed by a black armored carp. If there were any remaining debris, it would also be washed away by the surging river water. No matter whether it's the people in town or not, even if they pass by outsiders, there will definitely be some traces left. His eyes were somewhat eerie, as he looked at the big lump on his forehead and silently noted it down. The revenge of killing oneself, how can one not seek revenge? The black armored carp stared at the dead fish's eyes and twitched for a moment. The strength of the tail twitching from Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com became weaker and weaker, and it seemed that it was about to die. Brother Mo. Suddenly, a voice sounded at the bridgehead. Bai Mo followed the sound and saw a person with a peculiar appearance waving at him. It turned out that it was a friend from many years who came to look for him, and then he showed a smiling face and walked forward with great strides. Brother He. The person at the bridgehead gradually approached, revealing their true appearance. They were about 20 years old and had an extremely thin body, with thick eyebrows that connected left and right. Their fingers were long and thin, and their bones were faintly visible. They traveled at night and had been mistaken for ghosts. This person's name is Li He, with the courtesy name Changji. He lives in Xiacangshan outside the town and is the only good friend of Bai Mo in Changgu town. His ancestors came from an extraordinary family background, but unfortunately his family declined later, leaving only 2 acres of thin farmland in the mountains to make a living. Fortunately, although Li comes from a poor family, he is quite talented. He passed the imperial examination 3 years ago, and if it weren't for his father's sudden death, he would have had to be filial for 3 years. With his intelligence, even a series of successful examinations were possible. Due to his strange appearance, many children were frightened and cried when he was young, and no one wanted to play with him. Meanwhile, Bai Mo, who was adopted by Shuo of Zhong since childhood, was also rejected by many young children and was not afraid at all. Although he is 3 or 4 years younger than Li, he has been wise since childhood, developed quickly, and has a strong body. He is even taller than others, but he has played together and often eats and sleeps together for more than 10 years in a blink of an eye. A few years ago, Shuo, who adopted him, passed away due to illness, leaving him alone in Zhong, and even food and clothing were a problem. Fortunately, on weekdays, Li takes care of Bai Mo very much. Not only does he often provide assistance, but he also knows how to read and write. Thanks to Li's teaching him word by word, he saved a lot of expenses. Otherwise, with the foundation of Zhong, he would not be able to afford to buy books to read and write. Chapter 4. Personnel from Yamen. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In recent years, he has become stronger and can occasionally catch a few black armored carp from the river to make a living, which has gradually helped him accumulate some savings. The wind is strong on the bridge, let's go down later. Bai Mo saw Li's body swaying by the river wind, and quickly pulled him down the bridge, walking together towards the distant town. It's just a faint breeze, Li smiled and shook his head without resisting. He stared at Bai Mo for a while and couldn't help but ask, Brother Mo, are you soaked all over and in the water? And how did you get this forehead? Why is this big lump swollen? Do you need to see a doctor? Upon hearing this, Bai Mo's face turned a bit dark. After muttering a few unclear words, he casually said, I slipped and hit my foot while fishing. It's not a big deal. I'm strong and I'll be fine in a few days. Li didn't know if he believed it or not, but he didn't say much. As long as he was okay, he just reminded Bai Mo about some details of recuperation. Why did he come here? In the past, he should have been offering incense at this time. Bai Mo asked as he responded. I went to Zhong to find you, but I saw that you were not there, so I came here to find you. There are people from the Yamen who come to deliver the body in Zhong. After all, it's a business trip, so don't let them wait long. Li nodded and said. Upon hearing this, Bai Mo's footsteps quickened a bit. He was not very old and was able to live in peace in Zhong on weekdays, which was somewhat related to the fact that the Yamen would occasionally send unclaimed corpses to Zhong. He estimated the distance in his heart and watched as Li was not struggling on his way. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind and he couldn't help but ask, calculate the time. Brother, he is about to lose his filial piety, right? Li nodded, his eyes slightly turning red. It will be over in half a month. Although our family is poor, we still need to hold a banquet. Mo Guer can remember when to come to our house. Bai Mo patted Li's shoulder and comforted him a few words, agreeing to this matter. Li looked at the big bag on Bai Mo's forehead and fell silent for a few moments. Suddenly, he burst out laughing and said, Mo, this knock is more clever than before, and his eyes are much brighter. Clever. Bai Mo was taken aback for a moment. A few days ago, several articles and poems taught by He suddenly flashed through his mind. He was surprised in his heart. He had only read them roughly a few times before and had not yet memorized them, but now he can vividly remember them. He has fully understood the meaning in the articles, which is incomparable to the past. He is right. He used to not be considered intelligent, even stunned. It's not an exaggeration to describe him as a man of recklessness. He recalled his experience today and immediately realized that it should be closely related to his awakening of past life memories. He thought for a moment, but didn't inform him. He just smiled and said, perhaps it was a critical moment of life and death that opened his mind, but he felt that his mind was much better. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and untied the black armored carp behind him. Brother He, when I went to your house for dinner a few days ago, I saw that my aunt had lost a lot of weight. Coincidentally, I caught a black armored carp today. You can take it back and sell it to help with household expenses, and also help my aunt with her health. Upon hearing this, Li He was surprised, and only then did he notice the true appearance of the fish behind Bai Mo. He hesitated and said, a foot-long black armored carp will grow for at least 7 or 8 years. This is already the level of tribute. Seeing his refusal, Bai Mo simply handed over his clothes. Although he was a little younger, at the age of 16, he was half a head taller than Li He, an adult, and his strength was also astonishing. He firmly put Li He on his back and said, it's just a fish. We'll catch it in a few days. Besides, this fish won't come long or late. It must be fate's will. Just accept it with peace of mind. You're still young, but you also have to think about Auntie. She has been filial for so long and her health is in great deficit. He patted Li He's shoulder and then smiled, besides, we grew up together and we are brothers and sisters. What's the difference between us? We can't wait until you become a jurin or an official, and then you can help me. Upon hearing this, Li He's heart warmed and he took a deep breath. He smiled loudly and said, okay. When I become an official, I will divide your salary in half. Then I'll just wait. The sky became increasingly gloomy, and the wind gradually rose. The wind grew stronger, causing the forest to sway and rustle, rolling up branches and leaves that made people have to squint their eyes. Fortunately, Bai Mo and his companions were agile and soon arrived outside Changgu town. Junko, Bai Mo pushed Li He towards the direction of Xiaocang Mountain, which was the location of his father's tomb. Filial piety was still a few days away, and Li He needed to live in the small shed in front of the tomb. Then Bai Mo waved his hand and strode towards the town. Brother He, remember to ask my aunt to wash my clothes. Due to the production of black armored carp, Changgu town has gained some fame throughout the entire Hejian prefecture. People often settle here with their families, and in recent years, it has expanded outward frequently, known as 10-mile Changgu. Nowadays, there are no fewer than 10,000 households in the town, and the houses are very lively and bustling. Dong! 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 As Bai Mo walked into the town, a bright light suddenly flashed over his field of vision. In the thick clouds above, a muffled thunder echoed along with it. The thunder sounded like a drum, dull and rapid. Then, a thunderbolt suddenly exploded and swept across the sky. Wow! Not long after, raindrops as big as beans fell from the clouds onto the bluestone slabs, making a clattering sound. After a few breaths, my vision became blurred. The rain hit Bai Mo's wound, which made him grin and run against the rainstorm. He turned left and right along the road paved with bluestone slabs, gradually arriving at the southeast corner of the town. This place is remote and sparsely populated. At the end of the road, there is a charity village with no houses to rely on, which may seem unlucky as few people come on weekdays. The Yizhuang is quite old, with some weeds and moss growing on the green tiles on the roof, the white walls turning yellow, the wooden doors making a creaking sound when opened and closed, the door plaque being eroded by time, and the handwriting still blurring. The faded door couplets on both sides were exposed by feng shui, shaking and trembling, appearing gloomy in this weather. Bai Mo was adopted by Yizhuang since childhood and grew up here, feeling particularly friendly. Under the eaves of the Yizhuang, there stood a constable dressed in blue soap clothes, followed by 2 ugly grey-clothed constables holding their noses. These 3 people, Bai Mo, are familiar with each other. They are all public Yamen servants in Changgu town who come to Yizhuang several times a year. With many people in the town, there are also many deaths. If there are corpses that have not been restrained, they will be temporarily placed under the care of Zhong, either thrown or buried, and the decision will naturally be made by the Yamen. This is also the main source of income for Zhong. Captain Su, 2 tolerance points. Bai Mo quickly rushed forward and saluted the 3 of them with a fist. Brother Mo has returned, and his body has become much stronger. The blue-clothed constable led by him reached out and pinched Bai Mo's arm, praising him with a smile. Bai Mo glanced at the cart parked outside the door. Although it was covered in linen, it had already been soaked by the rain. The outline of the human body was clearly visible, and a faint odor was wafting out. He knew it clearly in his heart. He took out the key and opened the gate of the Zhong. Then he reached out and gestured, "Captain Su, 2 of you, please come in." Chapter 5. Shadow Zombies. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Constable Su nodded and called out to the 2 constables. He lifted a wooden board from the cart and walked into the Zhong with familiarity. Bai Mo ran quickly and arrived at the main hall of Zhong first. The lobby was quiet and deserted, with a few pitch-black coffins parked in the center, set up by 2 benches. There were no corpses inside the coffins, so they were not lit and were very dim. At the end, there is an old wooden table enshrining a plaque and a portrait. Bai Mo, who was familiar with the way, walked forward and picked up a fire folder from the altar, lighting an oil lamp. The wick of the oil lamp exploded with a few sparks, and the lobby instantly became much brighter, reflecting the plaque and portrait of Shuo. On the portrait, Shuo had white hair all over his head, drooping eyelids and yellow eyeballs, staring straight in front of him. His face was covered in dense black spots, piled up by wrinkles, forming a large area. The palms turn yellow with little flesh, are as thin as wood, and the muscles and bones are loose, unable to stretch straight. They are hooked together like eagle claws, not very human-like. This portrait was personally painted by Shuo before his death, and can be described as lifelike. Dong. At this moment, the 3 of them also entered the lobby, searched for 2 benches, and placed the wooden boards for carrying the body on them. Constable Su first walked up to the altar and lit 3 incense sticks. Then, with a strange expression on his face, he spoke with a reminder. "Brother Mo, this body is special, please take more care." Bai Mo was a bit surprised when he heard this. What did Captain Su mean? Captain Su shook his head and said, "You can tell at a glance." As he spoke, the constable on the side lifted the burlap and revealed a withered corpse. His upper and lower muscles had shrunk, and his color was black and purple, as if he had been drained of blood, leaving only a layer of skin and bones clearly visible. His facial features were sunken, his hair was withered and yellow, and he could only see the basic human form. Strangely enough, there were no signs of decay. Hiss. Bai Mo took 2 steps back. The body was truly frightening. He grew up in a charity village and had seen not only 100 but also 80 corpses, but it was also the first time he had seen such a strange appearance of death. Suddenly, a sentence spoken by Shuo came to mind, and Bai Mo's heart twitched slightly, causing some doubts and being temporarily suppressed by him. He slowly approached and circled around the body, whispering softly, "The body is buried without decay, is this a shaded corpse?" Captain Su listened on the side and exclaimed in admiration, "It's so insightful. It's true that the corpse is a corpse. It's said that if something happens to the corpse, it's easy to deceive the corpse into changing. However, there has never been such a zombie that can move freely in the entire Yasukuni region in recent years. It's all spread rumors and buried in a tomb, and soon the corpse will melt away." Bai Mo couldn't deny it and didn't refute it. Looking at the soil on the body of the corpse, he turned his head and asked, "How did it come from? It seems like it's been quite some time now." Constable Su hesitated for a few moments, but did not hide, the body actually rushed out of the mountain. Judging by the clothes, it should be the tomb of a big family that was washed down by last night's rainstorm. I don't know how it became like this. Otherwise, it would be easier to burn a fire, so as not to be afraid. As he spoke, he arched his hand at Bai Mo and said, with Lao Mo's little brother in charge, at most 2 to 3 days, the Yamen can produce a result. I'll have Xiao Wu inform you then. Seeing that Captain Su was about to leave, Bai Mo quickly stopped at the beginning and said, Captain Su, wait a moment. Su Yu's head and face were puzzled as he asked, Brother Mo, what else is going on? Bai Mo nodded and leaned closer to him, whispering a few words. Surprisingly, there are bandits from the martial arts world committing crimes in Changgu town. They don't even consider me, Su. Sheriff Su's face darkened and he said solemnly, Don't worry, Brother Mo. I'll find someone to investigate later. After speaking, Captain Su hurriedly left with the 2 relieved constables. Bai Mo is not surprised to see strange things. Zhong has been dealing with corpses all year round, and outsiders may feel uncomfortable. He just frowned and pondered something. If the memory in his mind is correct, he heard Shuo tell many stories about ghosts and gods when he was a child, including stories about zombies. He didn't think much about it before, but now his mind has become much clearer, and he suddenly feels that Shuo seems to have hidden many secrets. He turned his head to look at a corner on the left side of the lobby, where there was a narrow wooden door with a portrait pasted on it. In the painting, it was unknown whether it was a person or a ghost, with green eyes and red hair. He held a strange weapon blade and looked fierce and evil, staring at several coffins in the lobby with bright eyes. Behind the door was the place where Shuo had lived before his death. Speaking of which, from the moment he remembered, Shuo strictly prohibited him from entering this room. In all these years, he had never seen the specific appearance of the room before. Outside the Zhong, the 3 constables Su buried their heads on their way. A constable behind them couldn't help but speak, Master, we are officials. Do we need to be so polite to Bai Mo? Sheriff Su didn't turn back and said in a muffled voice, Xiao Wu, do you know what Bai Mo looks like when someone like me is on duty? The constable named Xiao Wu muttered, Good skills, the person who shows the body to the Yamen. Constable Su suddenly stopped and turned his head to look at him at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, with a hint of disappointment in his eyes. He shook his head and said, Since I brought you out of the countryside and became a constable, I can't see people with the same mindset as before. He looked at the blurry village in the distance, and his voice became erratic. There are no parents at all, no wives or concubines at all, and no children at all. A person who eats alone and has a whole family is not hungry. This kind of person is carefree, which also means they have no weaknesses. In addition, they are skilled in martial arts. If someone gets angry, they are most likely to do the same thing as a man who gets angry and splashes blood in 5 steps. You can tell me how to solve it then. He turned his head to look at the 2 disciples behind him and warned, if someone like this can avoid offending, they must find something to do to distract their energy. Remember, the court wants stability, political achievements, and also our future. Besides, if we establish a good relationship, we may not be able to use it someday. Xiao Wu was stunned and stood in the rain for a long time without regaining his senses. After a long time, his eyes gradually changed and he bowed to Sheriff Su, saying, Yes. Master. Sheriff Su stepped forward and patted the shoulders of the 2 disciples, Work hard, I'll keep an eye on you. My position will always be yours. In the Zhuang, Bai Mo regained his senses and suddenly smiled in silence. He didn't rush to explore, but instead brought a basin of clean water and a bouquet of grapefruit leaves from the altar. The branches and leaves were soaked in clean water and sprinkled several times on the body. He took a deep breath, walked up to the body, bent down, and exerted force on his hands. Get up. The corpse was lifted by him with one hand, and the heavy weight weighed heavily on his arm. This weight is at least 150 pounds, Bai Mo straightened up and weighed it, feeling strange. The dried corpse looked meatless. How could it be so heavy? He held the body with one hand and walked to an empty coffin. With one hand, he pushed open the lid and threw it in. Chapter 6. Poisonous Insects in the Brain. You are listening at novel-full.audio. According to the method taught by Shuo, the body scent should first be purified with pomelo water, then tied with lotus root silk and hung with a copper bell at the mouth of the coffin. Finally, a pillar of incense should be added to complete the process. As for whether it is useful or not, in this world, it is better to believe in its existence than to believe in its absence, in order to have peace of mind. Bai looked at the corpse a few times and was about to cover it with a coffin lid. Suddenly, his ear twitched and he heard a sound coming from the corpse. He followed the sound and searched, his gaze fixed on the ear of the corpse. I saw 2 emerald threads dancing continuously in my ear hole. When he was puzzled, a green centipede crawled out of the ears of the dried corpse. What thing? Bai was shocked in his heart. This was the first time he had seen a green centipede, and it still lived in the head of a corpse. Is it a rare species? This green centipede is about the length of a chopstick, very slender, but surprisingly resilient. As soon as it appears, its body curves and bounces, and it leaps out of the coffin. It follows the coffin from the bench below and quickly crawls towards Shuo's room after landing. Wherever it passes, it leaves black marks. Hiss. What a powerful poison. Bai Mo's eyelids twitched. He didn't have time to stop, so he quickly chased after him. Although the green centipede was small, it was very agile. In the blink of an eye, it burrowed into the crack in the door. Bai blinked his eyes and turned his head to look at the portrait in the hall. In a daze, it seemed that Shuo was staring at him. Shuo, it's not my fault. I opened it just to catch the centipede. He muttered to himself, but without stopping his hand, he pushed open the door and walked in. Jia, it has not been opened for many years, and the wooden door makes a piercing sound, shaking off a patch of dust. Bai took 2 steps back, then covered his mouth and nose. When the dust settled, he looked into the room. At this glance, he was somewhat surprised. The room is not large, with a wooden bed squeezed in the corner, connected to a low cabinet next to it, already covered in dust. There were jars and jars made of clay placed around the wall, densely packed and mostly broken. Dark scorpions, colorful geckos, black spiders covered in fur, and even one-horned black snakes in the Heishui River. A large number of withered and damaged poisonous insects mixed with jar fragments spread all over the ground. A centipede with a forearm long is noticeably wandering among the dead insects on the ground, its shell turning red and purple, its head turning green and black, and a pair of fangs constantly opening and closing, emitting a buzzing sound. Across from the blue-headed centipede, the green centipede is facing it with its upper body raised, its tentacles constantly shaking and its mouth making a faint sound, ready to come forward and fight at any moment. Bai swallowed his saliva and his cold hair involuntarily exploded. Since he remembered, he has been living with Shuo in the Yizhuang. He also knows that Shuo has health problems and likes to use poisonous insects to make wine, but he never thought about the current situation. He had been staying in Yizhuang with such a big centipede for so many years. The centipede was so poisonous that if he were bitten while sleeping, he would never see the sun the next day. As the door opened, 2 poisonous insects, one big and one small, turned their heads to look at Bai Mo. The corner of his eye twitched and he silently retreated a foot away. Click. Indoor, 2 centipedes began to wander and fight, entangled together. Wherever they passed, fragments of clay cracked and clattered. The blue-headed centipede is thick and long. Although the green centipede is much thinner, its strength is not weak at all, and its toxicity is even more astonishing. It leaves marks on the shell of the blue-headed centipede, and soon it takes the upper hand. As Bai watched this scene, he became even more curious about Shuo's secret. A scene from his childhood seemed to appear before his eyes. Shuo once said that he came from a place called Bai Mountain, which is located in the wasteland of Lingnan. There is a village called Bai village in the mountain, and most of the people in the village use snake catching and insect catching methods, as well as pharmaceutical and poisonous methods. It is said that the people's customs are extremely fierce, and he is famous for selling medicinal materials made from poisonous insects. Speaking of which, why did Shuo leave Bai Mountain in the first place? Bai Mo thought for a moment and suddenly realized that he had never known the old man who had adopted him in these years. Buzz! A rapid cry rang out, and Bai Mo quickly looked over. In just a few breaths, the blue-headed centipede with a thin arm was already on the brink of death, lying motionless on the ground, making only a faint sound. The green centipede was nowhere to be found. He was shocked in his heart. Did the blue-headed centipede win? Did the other one get eaten? At the next moment, the shell behind the blue-headed centipede suddenly cracked open, and the green centipede slowly emerged without hesitation. Bai Mo fixed his eyes and saw that the blue-headed centipede had been eaten completely from inside, leaving only a layer of empty shell. The green centipede leisurely swam around the remaining empty shell, then clumped up as if resting or digesting. Good opportunity. Bai Mo's heart twitched as he quietly picked up the earless incense burner from the altar, poured out the incense ash, and then took the incense burner in one hand and the stove cover in the other. He gently approached the green centipede and covered it with a swoop. The green centipede struggled in an instant, constantly struggling and colliding in the incense burner. Bai Mo dared not slack off and kept shaking on the ground like a dice. After about a cup of tea, I completely calmed down in the incense burner at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Bai Mo flipped and shook his wrist with a shovel, and quickly closed the lid with his other hand. Quickly walked to the courtyard, lifted a heavy stone and pressed down the incense burner, only then breathed a sigh of relief. He took a wooden stick from the courtyard and returned to Shuo's room. He looked at the floor full of withered insect corpses, his eyes flickering, and scanned the room a few times before finally stopping on the low cabinet by the bedside. Bai Mo reached out and knocked on the low cabinet with a wooden stick, while listening attentively. After confirming that there was no movement in the low cabinet, he no longer hesitated and began to search for it. After a while. No. In front of the altar, Bai Mo looked at the portrait of Shuo, feeling puzzled. He searched the room carefully and found that apart from the wine soaked in poisonous insects, there were only a few medicinal pills and some unknown powders. As for the fantasy martial arts techniques and even the immortal inheritance, there was no trace. After pondering for a while, he couldn't figure it out. He sighed and thought that he had thought too much. Xingshu Shuo was just an ordinary old man, and the stories he had heard about ghosts and gods in his childhood were nothing but coaxing stories. Gulu. At this moment, waves of hunger came from within. Bai Mo looked outside the door and saw that it was getting late. He hurriedly covered the coffin with a lid, tied a copper bell, and inserted 3 incense sticks into the gap of the coffin. Then, he quickly walked to the backyard to solve his own food. The night is getting deeper, and the rainstorm has stopped. The breeze is gentle, with a faint chill, refreshing. Dong dong. The sky is dry and the things are dry, be careful of the fire. Dong, dong. Close the door and windows to prevent theft and theft. With the sound of the watchman's gong, the people of the town gradually fell asleep. Not long after, it was 3 shifts. Chapter 7. Zombies out of coffin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dong. Dong, dong. It's safe and sound. In a corner of the lobby of Zhong, a faint rubbing sound suddenly came from inside a coffin with a copper bell hanging from its head. Kaka kaka, it's like an old cat scratching a wooden board, or the sound of someone scraping against the wall with their nails, sometimes without a sound. Not long after, inside the incense burner pressed by heavy stones outside the courtyard, there was also a rustling sound, and the contents inside began to stir. More than half of the 3 shifts. Squeak. The lid of the coffin was slowly lifted open with a crack. Dang. As the gap grew larger, the lotus root thread on the coffin head was pulled apart, and the hanging copper bell suddenly fell to the ground. A crisp sound echoed through the cemetery. Dong. The coffin lid closed instantly. In the backyard, Bai Mo was sleeping soundly when he was suddenly awakened by the sound of the bell. He quickly put on his clothes, lit an oil lamp, and came to the lobby to check. He had just entered the lobby when a copper bell fell to the ground and caught his eye. He picked up the copper bell and scanned around the coffin containing the corpse, his gaze resting on the residual incense on the ground. Bai Mo stared at the coffin with a puzzled expression, feeling more and more uneasy as he thought about it. The copper bell fell to the ground, and the residual fragrance fell out. This coffin has definitely been opened before. Did a thief enter it? Or did you really want to pretend to be a corpse? Didn't Captain Su make it clear that there are no zombies in Jingwa? He calmed down and the scene of Shobwa talking about zombies came to mind. Under the mulberry tree, an old and a young sit together. Shobwa, is there really a zombie in the world? The young child looked up at the old man, full of curiosity. The old man touched the young child's head and hesitated. There should be some more. Remember, if the shadow corpse has just turned into a zombie, it usually wakes up at the 3rd watch, and more than half of the 3rd watch comes out of the coffin. If a copper bell is hung with lotus root silk, the zombie will be startled by the copper bell the first time it comes out of the coffin. The young child blinked and didn't expect the copper bell to have this effect. He quickly asked, and then? If a zombie appears in the Yizhuang, you must not run. When a person runs, they will leave a strong breath, and the zombie will follow the breath to find it. You need to climb up the roof beam in this gap, because the zombie will soon come out of the coffin again. Lying on the roof beam can make your breathing much higher than the zombie, so as not to let the breath entangle. If you can't find it, the zombie will come out of the lobby and search nearby. At this time, you need to take the opportunity to hide under the coffin before 4:30 o'clock, because at this time, the zombie will come back and search for high places. At 5 o'clock, the rooster crows, and as soon as the sky brightens, the zombies will naturally return to the coffin. Zombies, with a body as hard as wood and 1,000 pounds of strength, are usually only capable of subduing by martial artists alone. However, as long as it's daytime, everything will be fine. Shobwa. The young boy shrank his arms and moved his butt towards the old man. Mor is not afraid, and zombies are nothing to be afraid of. Apart from having a stiff body and greater strength than ordinary people, this kind of thing is not only afraid of chickens, dogs, the sun, sticky rice, garlic, and other chaotic things, but even when there are many people. As long as you have more courage, you can find a few people to rush forward, tie them with hemp rope, expose them to the sun, or even burn them on fire, which can be neat. Creak, creak. There was a sudden noise inside the coffin. Awakening by Mo, he regained his senses and watched as the movement of the coffin grew louder and louder. He felt a little uneasy in his heart. At such a close distance, it was too late to run. Although he didn't know the truth of what Shuo Bo said, he could give it a try. He blew out the oil lamp in his hand and quickly rushed to a pillar, using both hands and feet. In the blink of an eye, he jumped up and lay on the beam, staring at the coffin below. As the oil lamp went out, the inside of the house darkened. Outside, the moonlight was dim, leaving only a crescent. The hazy moonlight shone through the window, making things inside the house appear faintly in the darkness. It only takes a few breaths before and after. Boom! The coffin lid was lifted with a strong force. Bai Mo's gaze flickered, and he could see clearly that the corpse in the coffin seemed to have undergone some kind of change. His eyes were pitch black, with no trace of eye white, and his body was still black and purple. However, he had a pair of wild dog-like fangs, teeth exposed outside his lips like sharp blades, and 10 fingers and claws sharp like daggers. Compared to daylight, it was even more terrifying. In the next moment, the zombie's body was straight and without any force, but it slowly stood up silently without any movement. He never bent his knees, just lightly jumped out of the coffin and quietly fell to the ground. The zombie seemed to smell something and kept swimming in the lobby, jumping up and down. Bai watched as the zombie walked several times under the beam, but did not notice him at all. He relaxed a lot, but his heart also began to murmur, how did Shuo know that Feng Liang can avoid zombies? He really has a secret. Ha! He looked at Shuo's portrait and let out a sound. Fortunately, he reacted promptly and swallowed. In the dimly lit lobby, the portrait of Shuo was like a dark shadow that could no longer be seen clearly, but his eyes were extremely unusual. Looking from the beam, there was a faint fluorescence, as if staring in a certain direction. Bai remembered the abnormality in his eyes and prepared to search carefully after dawn. As for now, it's better to be careful. Below, zombies roamed the lobby over and over again. Shua. I don't know how long it took, but the zombie suddenly changed direction and jumped to the front door. With a flick of its arms, the door was slammed open with a strong force, and then the zombie didn't stop and left the lobby. On the beam of the house, Bai Mo's tongue twitched as she couldn't help but feel envious. This tremendous force effortlessly smashed the door bolt, and people in the martial arts world were able to confront such things. No wonder among those storytellers, the generals in the court were different from ordinary people, able to make a single-person charge and easily defeat 1,000 soldiers. He watched as the zombie's figure disappeared outside the door, his mind shook, and knowing it was time, he jumped off the beam and rushed to the coffin where the zombie had been before, lying down. Perhaps due to the seclusion of the village, the zombie left and only searched around the village before returning to the lobby. At the bottom of the coffin, Bai watched a pair of black and purple feet jumping back and forth in the lobby. Soon after, they suddenly disappeared from sight, and then a soft noise came from above the coffin where they were hiding. He felt a chill in his heart, knowing that the zombie was only a layer of wooden board away from him at this moment. Dong! 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 The coffin board above constantly made a heavy sound, as if it had been hit by a heavy object. Above the coffin, the zombie stood up and jumped non-stop, rotating in some direction each time, jumping higher and higher. Before long, it was even with the roof beam above, and then fell heavily again. Dong! 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 At the bottom of the coffin, the dull sound of collisions kept echoing in Bai Mo's ear, and his heart also followed up and down. Chapter 8. Tianliang Secret Scripts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The coffins in Yizhuang were all laid from Wang Ji's coffin, and the quality of his family's coffins has always been good, at least 500 to 600 pounds, so they should not be smashed. Nevertheless, he felt a little uneasy in his heart, always feeling that something was missing. Click. After an unknown amount of time, there was a sudden sound of breakage in his ear. Bai Mo's heart tightened and he looked up, only to find that the bottom of the coffin was intact. The sound of breakage became more and more obvious. He followed the sound and saw that there were tiny cracks on the legs of the bench next to him carrying the coffin, which were rapidly spreading. Bai Mo's pupils shrank and he didn't have time to think much. He quickly turned over and left the bottom of the coffin. At the next moment, the bench shattered into 2 pieces with a loud bang, and the heavy coffin fell heavily to the ground. Ha! A gloomy breath appeared above her head, feeling the wind coming from behind her head. Bai Mo's mind was solemn, rolling aside and getting up. He looked up and saw that the zombie was already within reach, with sharp claws sweeping towards his face like hooks, and the strong wind whistling. Although he has never practiced martial arts, he has always enjoyed wielding swords and sticks since he was young. Due to his background in Yizhuang, he has been ostracized by other children and has been fighting from childhood to adulthood. His martial arts skills are quite proficient, relying on his strong body. With the arrival of an ordinary martial arts school apprentice, he can easily fight 3 at a time. Looking at the fierce and terrifying claws of the zombie, although Bai Mo was not panicked, he leaned back and avoided it like a taut hard bow. He saw the zombie's body rotating along with his arms sweeping, and immediately lifted a foot to kick it fiercely at the zombie's waist, kicking it 2 steps away and widening the distance. Dong! As if stepping on a hardwood, Bai Mo's soles were numb from the shock. He shook his feet and watched as the zombie came again, but did not confront it head-on. Instead, he used the coffin as an obstacle in the lobby and kept swimming. It was not early now, all he needed to do was drag it up and it would be dawn. Boom! Seeing that the zombie had been unable to catch anyone for a long time, it seemed to have gone crazy. Its body twisted and then with a wave of its hands, it forcefully knocked off a coffin weighing 500 to 600 pounds. As Bai Mo watched the coffin fly over, his scalp immediately tightened and he quickly fell backwards, propping his hands on the ground and using an iron bridge move. Dong! The coffin collided with another pair of empty coffins, causing the frame to fall apart. The 2 coffins flew horizontally and collided fiercely with the pillars, causing the beams to rustle and shake off a patch of dust. Bai Mo supported himself with both hands, while exerting force from his waist to lift himself up. Then, with this force, he jumped into the air and flipped over the head of the attacking zombie. Without waiting to fall, he suddenly kicked the zombie's back with both feet. With this force, the zombie's body became unstable and stumbled, crashing into the collapsed coffin ahead. Wow! The zombie opened and closed its hands, lifted the coffin, and breathed heavily as it approached to attack. Cluck cluck. Suddenly, there were sounds of roosters crowing in the distance. The zombie paused and turned a blind eye to Bai Mo not far away. They returned directly to the coffin where they lived, waved their arms, lifted the scattered lid of the coffin, and quickly lay down in the coffin. Boom! The coffin lid fell heavily, tightly fitting the body of the coffin. Whew! Bai Mo fell to the ground, stabilized his figure, and breathed a sigh of admiration for martial arts. Among the storytellers, the generals of Jingguo were all strong and capable of pulling down 9 oxen and caressing Liang Yizhu. Slaying birds with knives, cracking stones with tombstones, exhaling breath to form swords, and wielding cauldrons without a trace are all leisurely tasks. They are invincible on the battlefield and can move freely among armies. It is not an exaggeration to say that pushing the 8 horses horizontally and pulling the 9 oxen backwards is not an exaggeration. If such a person encounters a zombie, they may be able to smash it with just 1 punch. It is said that the imperial court used 6 large cauldrons as scales to measure strength and divided the martial arts of Jingguo into 6 levels. Warriors, heroes, warriors, and masters. Corresponding to 500 jin, 1000 jin, 2000, 4000, 8000, and 10,000 jin respectively. A strong warrior joining the army can directly become a sergeant, a brave warrior can serve as a colonel, and a strong warrior can already be considered a general. If he is a brave warrior, he is the general who leads the army, and it is easy to be granted the title of marquis and promoted to the rank. The fierce warriors were even more formidable, guarding the 4 corners of Jingguo and serving as the pillars of the country. As for the great master, it will be difficult to become a master for 100 years, but it is only a reflection for the world to show the way forward in martial arts. According to the Annals of Emperor Taizu Jing, Emperor Taizu appointed 4 fierce warriors as generals, which could be considered invincible. He suppressed other forces in one fell swoop and established the foundation of Jingguo. Subsequently, the 4 fierce warriors were crowned kings and retired with the country. Now, 600 years have passed, and the descendants of the 4 kings are still guarding the 4 gates of Jingguo. Bai Mo considered himself to be exceptionally talented, but his strength was only about 300 pounds, and he couldn't even consider the threshold of martial arts. At this point, his gaze couldn't help but fall on a corner of the lobby, where an empty coffin happened to be placed. If there were no mistakes, this position was exactly the direction that Shobua's portrait was looking at when he was on the beam. Bai Mo turned a blind eye to the chaos in the lobby and quickly walked forward, circling around the coffin twice, sometimes tapping and stomping, searching inch by inch. Bang, bang dong. Dong. Knocking at the head of the coffin and looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, his eyes lit up. The sound here seemed to have a subtle difference, much more empty and floating than elsewhere. After thinking for a moment, Bai Mo simply lifted the lid of the coffin and flipped it inside. That's it. He was pleasantly surprised. The wooden board at the head of the coffin was 3 inches thicker than the rest of the coffins, and there was definitely a hollow layer when knocked out. He hurriedly left the coffin, ran to the backyard, found a chisel and a short hammer, and then returned to the coffin, aiming at a gap at the head of the coffin and started chiseling. When? Not long after, in front of the altar, Bai Mo looked at the wooden box in front of him and sighed, Shobua, Shobua, you indeed have a secret. He bowed to the portrait of Shobua and carefully opened the wooden box. There is not much in the box, but at the top is a letter and below it are several old ancient books. Ha! Shobua left it for me. Looking at the words Bai Mo personally opened on the letter, Bai Mo was surprised in his heart. Since it was for him, why did Shobua hide it so deeply and never leave a word before his death? Although he couldn't figure it out, he had a premonition that all of this was written in a letter in a moment. Bai Mo put down the letter and hesitated. As he thought, Shobua was not an ordinary person and had also been wandering in the martial arts world. He was known as the 5-Poison Langjun. According to Shobua, there was a legend passed down in Baiya Mountain where he was born. A long time ago, a fairy stayed in Baiya Mountain and captured all the poisonous substances in one day. Years have passed, and the stories in the village were only fabricated by idle people. Later, when Shobua entered the mountain to pick herbs, he accidentally fell off a cliff and not only survived, but also discovered 2 incomplete ancient books at the bottom of the cliff, which recorded a unique method and several incomplete goo refining prescriptions. Chapter 9. Cangchongzi Shuo 5 Duhang, Volume 1. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. No man in the world has ever fantasized about calling for wind and rain, riding a horse to be appointed as a marquis. Now that he had the opportunity, after some inspection, Shobua was overjoyed and thought he had received the immortal inheritance. After achieving success in his cultivation according to the book's records, he left the mountain fortress and searched for fairies everywhere. Unfortunately, after more than 10 years without success, he relied on his skillful control of poisonous insects to establish a great reputation in the martial arts world. Later, one day while practicing, Shobua accidentally went wrong, causing the toxins in his body to become disordered. 100 toxins entered the marrow and there was no medicine to cure them. His body was deteriorating day by day. Until I accidentally ate a black armored carp and found that it had some suppressive effect on toxins, I inquired about the source and settled in Changgu town. Later, I picked up Bai Mo from a giant turtle by the Blackwater River. As for why the inheritance was hidden in the coffin, Shobua felt that the things recorded in the book were too dangerous and did not want Bai Mo to step into the mortal world. However, he was reluctant to destroy it and decided to hide it in the coffin. Whether it was discovered by later generations or buried in the earth, it all depends on fate. If the recipient of the book has the intention, they can send the inheritance back to Baiya Mountain, which is also considered as returning the fallen leaves to their roots. Bai Mo looked at several ancient books in the box, one of which was called Foreign Object Chronicles, which recorded hundreds of strange beings such as zombies, wooden charms, spirits, and ghosts. What Shobua had talked about and what he had not talked about were all included, which broadened his horizons. For example, zombies, as mentioned in the book, have various unique terrains in the world, which are also known as feng shui. Some terrains can attract the turbid qi of the earth, and after the corpse is buried, it is nourished by the earth's qi, which not only does not rot, but also forms a subtle connection with the earth. There is a peculiar saying in the book that when a corpse is in the soil, it is like a fetus in the mother's womb. The turbid chi of the earth can nourish the corpse like the mother's body, but it is also very heavy, like a cage, pressing the corpse tightly. If the body is dug out or the terrain collapses and changes, this connection is broken, and a change will occur, which is commonly known as zombie transformation. As for the second martial arts technique, its full name is Cangchongzi Shuo Dujing. Volume 1 inch, which is quite unique in its name, unlike the straightforward martial arts skills in the storytellers and tea houses, although he has no way to learn martial arts and has never had contact with those martial arts experts, he often listens to various biographies of people. Most of those people use martial arts such as splitting palms, sacrificial knives, deadly spears, and tyrannical whips, which are easily classified. Bayamo opened it and saw that the first page was not a text, but a delicate small painting. In the painting, a black mountain rises straight into the clouds, with 5 large poisonous insects occupying it from all directions. At the foot of the mountain, snakes and scorpions sway their tails. On the mountaintop, toads gaze at the moon. On the mountainside, centipedes circle the mountain into pillars. In the jungle, spiders weave webs, venomous bees flutter their wings, and there are faintly hundreds of poisonous insects lurking in the forest. The momentum is terrifying, and the poisonous insects on the mountain peaks are lifelike, as if they will leap out of the painting in the next moment. There are also a few small lines of text in the blank space next to it, which should be the annotation left by Shuo. The cultivation method is called wudu, which is actually the 5 poisons. When used with 100 poisons, it emphasizes using poison to attack poison, using poison to baptize and refine oneself, and achieving a certain level of delicacy. After reaching a certain level, if the poison is difficult to damage, various poisonous insects can be kneaded and played with freely in the palm of one's thigh. However, although the progress of using poison as medicine is fast, the toxicity is prone to deviation, and one must always pay attention to avoid going astray. As she watched, Bai Mo's face gradually showed a surprised expression, and then the surprised expression became more and more intense, with some confusion. According to the book's records, this Cangchongzi Shuo Dujing is completely different from what was expected. It does not teach people to polish their bodies, refine muscles and bones, nor does it record any martial arts. Instead, it aims to balance the human body. In the book, it is said that the 5 capital classic has been refined to a certain extent, naturally full of energy, with a face like a crown of jade. It is difficult to be harmed by any poison, has bright eyes and night vision, is as light as a swallow, and is unforgettable at a glance. As for the slight increase in strength, it is actually incidental. Wow! He was mesmerized by what he was reading, and his hand paused as he looked at the sudden cessation of the content. He felt suffocated and said, "Why is there only a way to refine poison and wash oneself?" He immediately reacted, feeling regretful. No wonder Shuo said it was a broken book, or no one taught it. Even if he was given a top-notch martial arts book, he wouldn't be able to learn it. On the contrary, it wouldn't be as convenient as this cleansing method. If it were true as the book said, besides all the strange things, it would increase his strength by 1,000 pounds and reach the realm of heroes. The last one is the White Crow Gu Jing. Upon flipping through it, there are numerous records of poisonous insects and herbs, with only a few prescriptions recorded on the last page, which are undoubtedly the legendary Gu Fang. Shiji Gu, Een Snake Gu, Heart-Eating Gu, Boiling Blood Gu, Blood Wu Gu, just by name, one can tell that it is quite extraordinary. Unfortunately, the incomplete and powerful ones are only recorded in the 2 books, Boiling Blood Gu, and Blood Wu Gu, while the rest are basically only left with a name, which is truly regrettable. The book records that true Gu not only kills invisibly, but also has many wonderful uses. As Shuo said in his book, he left Baiya Mountain not only to search for a fairy tale, but also to complete the inheritance. The Qingtu centipede is the poisonous insect he deduced from the residual formula to feed. Zhaozhuyuan.com, Gu. Bai Mo was shocked in his heart. Looking at this unfamiliar and familiar word, he felt that his cognition had been overturned once. First, there were zombies, and then there were the legendary Gu insects. Is it difficult to become a god in the world? I have been studying with Brother He for many years, but why haven't I heard of them? As he pondered, his eyes gradually brightened up, adding something of unknown meaning. Calling for wind and rain, turning stones into gold, immortality, riding dragons, and crossing phoenixes, sitting and watching the sea turn into mulberry fields, whether in the memories of past lives or in the cognition of this life, the word Xian always contains all possibilities. He looked at the scriptures in his hand, and his mind flashed with a strange smile as he played with the poisonous insect Jie Jie. He muttered to himself, "These books don't seem to be very righteous, and I don't know if they will be pursued as villains in the future. Anyway, after learning them, how can there be a principle of dividing good and evil based on a single martial arts skill? Besides, if there are really any inconspicuous ones, they will all be fed to the poisonous insect." In a moment, Bai silently calmed down and shook his head, chuckling lightly. Even if Shobwa had to run around all his life, he wouldn't have a chance. It's useless to think too much. It's better to focus on the current situation. After all, the method of washing oneself with hundreds of poisons in the 5 Capital Classic also needs to be tried after collecting all the poisons. He looked at the coffin in the center of the Yizhuang and felt uneasy. This kind of ghost was too dangerous, and he still had to find a way to solve it. He had planned to pry open the coffin during the day and drag out the zombie to expose it to the sun. However, after reading Foreign Body Chronicles, he realized that zombies have a natural inclination towards yin and yang, but it does not mean that they are completely unable to move during the day. Opening their coffins recklessly will only provoke zombies to come out and attack people. Fortunately, the book also records many coping strategies, the simplest of which is to prepare a pot of black dog blood and 4 dog claws. Chapter 10. Searching for Dogs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. To deal with this zombie who has just faked a zombie, if you throw it at the zombie, it will immediately fall down, as if 4 vicious dogs have crushed its limbs. At the same time, the flow of earth qi, turbid qi, and yin qi in the body will be agitated and scattered by the yang qi, and it will take at least half a day to recover. At this time, let the person handle it. As for the person looking for the Yamen, after pondering for a while, he temporarily suppressed his thoughts and tested the authenticity of foreign object records, before proceeding. As the sun rose, Bai Mo walked out with some scattered silver coins. It rained heavily in the town for 2 or 3 days in a row, and there was a lot of accumulated water in the low-lying areas of the bluestone slabs. The roof was also very damp, and at this time, it was exposed to the scorching sun, and the water vapor immediately evaporated, as if shrouded in clouds and smoke. In front of a spacious mansion in the east of the town, several men gathered at the entrance, occasionally looking into the distance. Why did the young master suddenly rush back from the capital? "Young master, you can enter school and study, but my Qilin from the Huang family." "What do you think, young master?" "Can we guess?" "Calculate the time, it's almost here." Bai Mo came out of the Yizhuang and passed by the Huangfu. When he saw several people standing on tiptoes with their long necks stretched out, he couldn't help but laugh. "Bai Mo, what are you laughing at?" A man in front of the Huang mansion saw it with his sharp eyes and hurriedly rushed, hurry up, my young master will come back in a while." "Let him see you, I'm so annoyed." Bai Mo gave him a sidelong glance and couldn't help but say, "Huang Sheng will come back as soon as he comes back." "What does it have to do with me?" The man turned black and muttered, "You used to fight with the young master a lot when you were a child." "So what? He's not as skilled as a person. If he loses, he has to admit it. If he wants to fight, he can just say it. It's just a matter of calculating with you to take the blame for stealing my black armored cart before." Upon hearing the man's words, Bai Mo stood still. A few years ago, he was young and his body had not yet grown. His strength was much smaller than now. Every time he caught a black armored carp, he was forcibly bought by these people. For this reason, he fought with them a lot. It was only in the past 2 years that he had gained the upper hand, and his fists and feet had become more proficient through fighting. Now, these people no longer dare to block the way and force him to buy. You can't talk nonsense. Every time you give me money, it's a lot of money. The man's tone paused, feeling aggrieved. The head of the house has an order to send black armored carp to the young master in the capital every month. He also wants to fish by himself, but that thing is very difficult to catch. Strangely speaking, the entire Canggu town mostly relies on luck to catch black armored carp. Ordinary people may not catch a single one for several years, but Bai Mo, who knows where his skills come from, often gains something. In order not to be punished, he could only buy from Bai Mo with a few brothers. Hush. As soon as he thought of Bai Mo's fight, the man felt a faint pain on his body. Every time he bought fish, he couldn't help but be beaten by him. This kid's fist was so heavy that he even felt that if he dared to snatch it without paying, Bai Mo would dare to beat him to death. Bai Mo snorted coldly. If it weren't for the money being enough, he could have used these people as living targets to practice martial arts. Coupled with Igor's kindness towards him, he was worried that killing someone would lead to a murder case and implicate Li's mother and son. He would have been ruthless long ago. Jinghua has been peaceful for a long time, and this Canggu town is just a small disturbance. They are all neighbors, mostly turning a blind eye. If they dare to commit a murder, they will definitely not be able to get good fruits. He didn't say much to these people and turned around and left. Huang Sheng has a small heart, an awkward temperament, and is stubborn like a donkey. It's difficult to get along with, but it's better not to see him again. Bai Mo rushed towards the meat shop, pondering in his heart that he and Huang Sheng were about the same age. They were both orphaned in Yizhuang and a young master from Huangfu. They looked at each other and had a lot of fights when they were young. However, they were beaten and cried by him every time, but he refused to give up. It wasn't until a few years ago when Huang Sheng was sent to study in the capital that it finally subsided. Not long after, Bai Mo raised his head and looked at Zhang Ji's yellow ear shop in front of him. He wanted to say that in Canggu town, where can we find black dog blood? The first thing that came to his mind was here. Yo! It's Mo Xiaoga from Yizhuang, but someday hasn't come yet. At the door, a young man in his early 20s was dressed in coarse linen clothes, with a cloth wrapped around his shoulders, greeting guests. When he saw Bai Mo, his eyes lit up and he happily approached to greet him. Xiao Qi Gu. Bai Mo's face showed a smile. This yellow ear shop not only eats, but also sells a type of strong liquor. When Shou Bo was still here, he often asked him to come here to drink and sell meat. He came and went, which was quite familiar. Perhaps it had just rained, and many customers from the yellow ear shop came to eat meat. Bai Mo looked inside the house but didn't go in. He asked directly, "Little seven brother, is there black dog blood in the shop? It should be all black and without any stray hair on the male dog. As the saying goes, 1 black, 2 white, 3 flowers, and 4 yellow, black dogs sell the best. There are a few in the store, but they are either female or have impure fur." Zhang Xiaoqi looked surprised. Black dog blood is notorious for its foul smell, and the smell is particularly strong. Why do you want this thing? Bai Mo was disappointed in his heart. The place with the most black dogs in the town was here, and he couldn't find them here. Other places were even harder to find. Do you know where to find them, little seven brother? Looking for a completely black male dog. Zhang Xiaoqi rubbed his chin and thought for a while before suddenly thinking of something to look for at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. He clapped his hands and said, "Old Li." Bai Mo's spirit shook and he looked at Zhang Xiaoqi. "Does Lao Li have one? Where is he?" That's right, there's a hunter named Li on the mountain flat outside the town. When I went to collect dogs last year, I saw that he had 5 hunting dogs in his family. They were all black without any stray fur, with black fur, black claws, black belly, and even a black tongue. My father is an expert in hunting dogs, and he fell in love with them at a glance. Unfortunately, the hunter said he doesn't sell anything, and my father kept talking about it for a long time. Zhong Xiaoqi told the truth about the whereabouts of the hunter. Bai Mo breathed a sigh of relief, and as long as he had a clue, he didn't rush to leave. Instead, he talked to Zhong Xiaoqi about the recent influx of outsiders in the town. After the tea was ready, he waved his hand at Xiaoqi and said, "Thank you, Xiaoqi. Can you help me keep an eye out for more information? If you have any news later, let me know." He walked briskly out of the town and glanced at Li He as he passed by the foot of Xiaocang Mountain. From a distance, he saw Li He burying his head under a cypress tree, reading without disturbing him. The 3-year mourning period was almost over, and he estimated that He should also participate in the imperial examination and strive for the title of successful candidate, which could not be delayed. Changgu town is located in a valley in the mountains, where water and land intersect and mountains and rivers are picturesque. Surrounded by 10 miles of lush forests and lush cypresses, it exits the town and passes through Xiaocang Mountain, where Meilu Mountain leads to Kaoshanping. There are about 100 households here, most of whom make a living by farming and hunting. The Li family hunter mentioned by Zhong Xiaoqi is considered the head hunter of the village hunting team. Entering the Kaoshanping and looking south, you can see a big willow tree. Walking west along the tree, the 3rd household should be here. Bai Mo thought to himself, reciting the address given by Zhong Xiaoqi. After walking south and west for a while, he stopped outside a courtyard.